Hi, I'm Diane Macedo. Today on ABC News Live, the final battle of the midterms is decided. Senator Raphael Warnock has defeated Herschel Walker in the Georgia Senate runoff, giving Democrats an outright majority in the Senate. We're in Atlanta with what this means for President Biden and his agenda. Former President Trump's company convicted of financial crimes, what the guilty verdict means for Trump and his company as he runs for president again. The hunt is on for the suspect in the North Carolina power outage. A resident has been found dead in a house with no power, with roughly 30,000 people still in the dark. But we begin with Senator Raphael Warnock winning re-election and giving Democrats an outright majority in the Senate. Warnock fended off a challenge from Republican Herschel Walker in a race that was bitter and contentious until the very end. Congressional correspondent Rachel Scott has the latest from Atlanta.
After a hard-fought campaign, you got me for 6 more years.
Democrats clinching a major victory. Senator Raphael Warnock defeating his Republican challenger, Herschel Walker.
The people have spoken.
The pastor turned politician surviving his second runoff election, handing Democrats an outright majority in the Senate. Voters turned out in record numbers, 3.5 million votes cast. But Walker underperformed this time around, getting less support than he did in November.
I'm not going to make any excuses now because we put up one heck of a fight.
The former football star spent much of his campaign fending off one scandal after another, accused of domestic violence, of lying about his resume, failing to publicly acknowledge several children, and paying for 2 women to have abortions, which he denies. That turned some voters like Kirk Watkins away. He voted for Republican Governor Brian Kemp, but did not support Walker.
He has no policies, and he's hand-selected by Trump.
Warnock, who made history as the state's first black senator, insisting Georgia sent a clear message to the country, reflecting on his path to the nation's capital.
I want to say thank you to my mother. She grew up picking somebody else's cotton, but tonight she helped pick her youngest son to be a United States Senator.
So this now adds to a string of losses for the Republican Party, and Herschel Walker's name is added to a long list of candidates backed by former President Donald Trump that lost this midterm election. As for Democrats, they do have that outright majority in the Senate, which will make things like confirming judicial nominees, legislating and negotiating within their own party a whole lot easier.
And Rachel Scott, thank you for that. Let's bring in ABC News political director Rick Klein, along with our Jay O'Brien on Capitol Hill for more on this. Thank you both for being here. Rick, how big is this win for Democrats, and how did it happen?
Well, it works. It's big inside the Senate because of the advantage that gives them on votes and in committees, and it's also big psychologically, given the power of Georgia and the way that this kind of puts an exclamation point on a very good election cycle for them. The way it happened, I think, is relatively straightforward. The map looked a lot like it did 2 years ago, where you had a big suburban turnout for the Democratic candidate, big turnout in the black communities. Very rare to have 2 black candidates run against each other. We saw President Obama there last week on behalf of Senator Warnock, and I think Republican enthusiasm was tempered a bit by the various scandals that Herschel Walker faced throughout. Clearly, there were lots of distractions up to and including his associations with former President Trump. A lot of people are asking questions about what Trump's support did and didn't mean, but in this case, it seems not to have helped Herschel Walker, although I think there are some Democrats who still are going to wonder, how did Herschel Walker, with all his obvious flaws, come so close to getting into the United States Senate?
Jay, what does this mean for President Biden's agenda in the Senate and getting it through the House?
Yeah, and on big pieces of legislation, it means that Chuck Schumer doesn't have to keep every single Democratic senator in line to vote for that legislation. You remember the name Joe Manchin, a name a lot of Americans learned over the last few years, a frequent Democratic holdout vote. He now doesn't have the kind of power over Senate Democrats that he had previously. Chuck Schumer alluded to this a little bit ago, saying this. Here's what he said.
It's big, it's significant. It gives us we can breathe a sigh of relief. Obviously, judges and nominees will be a lot easier to put on the bench.
A literal sigh of relief that he breathes there in front of reporters. He also mentioned judicial nominees. It means that they will get out of committee faster, that 51-seat majority, get onto the floor faster for votes. Democrats have already confirmed a lot of judicial nominees over President Biden's first 2 years in office, 84 so far, and that is a record-breaking number. It outpaces even former President Trump, Diane.
Now, Rick, some potential Republican challengers are already looking ahead to 2024 to run against Trump. So what can we expect to see over the next 2 years, and who are you keeping your eye on?
This election cycle did nothing to dissuade, I think, any of them. The power, the political power of President Trump clearly is waning inside the party. I'd expect we can see some announcements early next year. Nikki Haley, I think, Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of State, former Vice President Mike Pence. All three of those people actually worked for Trump in the White House, worked under Trump, which is pretty telling. And the big name is someone that Jay O'Brien knows very well from his years covering Florida politics, Ron DeSantis. He's the first name out of the mouths of many, many Republican donors that I talked to. He's high in the polls, came off a big re-election campaign just a month ago in a bad night for Republicans. DeSantis had a huge night in the state of Florida. So I think he's the biggest name, the big question to be answered sometime in the spring.
Now, Jay, now that the midterms are over, Congress is up against a deadline to fund the government or face a shutdown. So where do things stand there?
Yeah, Rick is far better at plugging my reporting than I. But on a government shutdown and funding negotiations, they're ongoing right now. Both sides are talking it out, but those talks appear stalled. I can tell you that's the sense on the Hill. They haven't even agreed to an overall number as to how much this would cost. So the question is, what happens next? They could punt to the Christmas holiday. They could even punt till just in the early days of the new year, right before that new Congress. They could come to an agreement between that window, or there could be what's called a continuing resolution, or a CR, which both sides have said is not ideal, particularly because of the effect it would have on federal agencies who would be operating, they say, on less money than they expected to in the coming year. The question facing lawmakers now is how quickly can they come to an agreement? Do they have to spend Christmas here at the Capitol, or does this drag into the new year, or even potentially into the new Congress when Republicans take control of the House come early January?
Rick, do you expect Democrats will try to kind of sneak anything else in before the end of the year while they still control both houses?
Oh, heck yeah. They're going to do whatever they can to take some of the burden off of governing in the new year. There are, as Jay knows, there are a couple of must-pass bills. They're going to try to sweeten them with all sorts of things that make some of the governing easier, because even as they add to this margin in the Senate by a little bit, they do lose control in the House. Governing is going to be difficult. Establishing those relationships will be difficult. Any work that they can help President Biden and the Democratic majority as it continues to exist for the next couple of weeks will be very much welcome in the new year.
All right. Jay O'Brien, Rick Klein, political director and publicist. Has a nice ring to it. Thank you both.
I do what I can. Thanks, guys.
And a New York jury has convicted the Trump Organization on 17 counts of criminal tax fraud and other financial crimes. Prosecutors say for 15 years, executives of the family business leaned on the company to evade income taxes on rent, private school tuition, and luxury cars. And it comes as several other investigations put mounting pressure on the former president. Chief Washington correspondent Jonathan Karl has the latest.
For Donald Trump, the Trump Organization is more than just a business. It's central to his identity in real estate and in politics. A Manhattan jury deliberated for roughly 10 hours before finding the company guilty on all 17 counts. Guilty of falsifying business records and much more as part of a scheme to avoid paying taxes.
This was a case about lying and cheating, false documents to the end of evading taxes for the benefit of individuals and the corporations.
The prosecution's star witnesses were some of Trump's longest-serving and most loyal aides, chief among them the company's longtime CFO, Alan Weisselberg, who pleaded guilty in August to keeping much of his compensation off the books. The company paying for his apartment, his Mercedes-Benz, even his grandchildren's tuition, paying income taxes on none of it. Weisselberg never implicated Trump directly, and the former president has not been charged. But the prosecutors repeatedly invoked Trump's name, saying he explicitly sanctioned tax fraud, showing the jury documents he signed, like this check for Weisselberg's grandchildren's tuition. Trump's lawyers said the real culprit was Weisselberg, and they wasted no time saying they would appeal.
We'll certainly be appealing, of course.
The guilty verdicts carry a maximum penalty of $1.7 million. But potentially more damaging is the impact being guilty of multiple felonies will have on the company's ability to do business going forward. In a written statement, Donald Trump said he was disappointed with the verdict and insisted that neither he nor any members of his family did anything wrong. But this is really just the beginning of Donald Trump's legal troubles. Diane?
John Carl, thank you. And let's bring in investigative reporter Catherine Falders, an ABC News contributor, host of the Law and Crime Network, and New York City homicide public defender Brian Buckmeyer with more on this. Catherine, the felony convictions carry fines totaling up to $1.7 million. But what are the larger consequences on the company and on Trump himself?
Well, look, as John Carl pointed out, too, the Trump organization has been central to all of his business dealings, whether that's real estate, et cetera. But the larger consequences here, while that fine amount might not seem that hefty given all of the charges here, the question is whether will banks loan them money? How does this impact their ability to do business? This is surely something that Trump is thinking about behind the scenes, and sources I've been talking to say these are the investigations that he has been the most worried about, those that relate to the Trump organization. In terms of himself, Trump himself, he wasn't convicted of any wrongdoing here, but the prosecutors showed evidence that directly, they say, showed that Trump had knowledge of this. They showed checks that he signed, for example. They mentioned his name multiple times. So something that obviously he is worried about in terms of his business and how the business will even function going forward.
Brian, what was the key evidence against Trump's organization to allow the prosecution to make this link?
Well, interestingly enough, I don't think it was Alan Weisselberg that everyone thought was going to be the star witness, because he kind of gave something for the defense and the prosecution. I think it was that connective tissue in those signed checks over to top executives to try to cut through the tax code. And so I think showing the connection between the Trump organization, the executives, and these fraudulent checks is what really made the case, especially when the defense was arguing these are just rogue agents. Those signed checks with Donald Trump's signature really pushed home the guilty conviction.
Now, Trump's lawyers are already vowing to appeal here. Do you think they have a strong case?
I'm not quite sure if they have a strong case. In New York, you have 30 days to an appeal criminal conviction like this, and there are a number of grounds: insufficient evidence, juror misconduct, other forms of legal errors, like some evidence should have come in or some evidence should not have come in. As I look at this case, I see a lot of strong evidence towards a conviction. Of course, it is their right to appeal. They'll go through the process. But in terms of whether or not they have a strong case, I don't really see it.
Catherine, the Trump organization also faces a civil lawsuit from the New York Attorney General and other criminal investigations in Manhattan and Georgia. So what's the latest there, and what are you watching for next?
Yeah, look, I think that these are just one of the many investigations. Obviously, the New York Attorney General, you mentioned the Georgia one, which is a Fulton County investigation having to do with the 2020 election. As was pointed out, this is just the tip of the iceberg for Trump as it relates to investigations. We also know the January 6th Congressional Committee has been investigating this. There's talk of criminal referrals as it relates to January 6th, and of course the broader DOJ investigation into January 6th and the documents that were found at Mar-a-Lago. Look, lots of legal troubles, you could say, ahead for the former president here.
All right, Catherine, Brian, thank you both. The sheriff now says murder charges could be brought in the North Carolina power outage after a person was found dead in a house with no power. Police are now investigating if the death is related, but over 30,000 customers are still without power after 2 electrical substations were attacked this weekend. Police are still searching for those responsible. Mona Khazar-Abdi has the details. Mona?
Hey, Diane. Authorities say this investigation is moving at a fast pace, but the stakes could be higher if that death is connected to the power grid attack. If so, the Moore County Sheriff says whoever is responsible could be charged with murder. Meanwhile, residents here have spent a 4th night in the dark. Duke Energy crews are working in 24-hour shifts to restore the power. And they say by midnight tonight, they expect to get the job done. But this blackout has had a heavy toll on this community. Their lives have been disrupted. Schools and businesses have been closed. I spoke with an 80-year-old Army veteran who says it was the kindness of strangers that helped him get through. Diane?
All right, Mona Khazar-Abdi, thank you. And I'd like to bring in Southern Pines Town Manager Reagan Parsons for more on this. Reagan, thanks for being on. What's the latest update on this effort to restore power there in Moore County?
So the good news is the Duke Energy crews, of course, have been working around the clock since Saturday evening. And we got some news this morning that repairs overnight were significant and very successful. We are actually, I'm getting reports almost every 10 minutes of neighborhoods that are now starting to come back on. And assuming everything continues to move as planned, I think they will more than meet their established time of midnight this evening. And hopefully everyone will have some power and some lights before sun even sets this evening. But so far, very, very positive news all morning long.
So how's the community responding to this? What's it like there at night right now?
Well, it's very dark. This is not an area that has a lot of ambient light. It's not like approaching a city from afar where you can see lights in the sky. It's a very dark area. We are very near a military installation, so that's very important for training. And traffic lights have been down since late Saturday night, but the community has really pulled together. Everybody's been fantastic. We've those internal to the community that have generator power or the ability to help out have come out in droves, and we've seen a lot of help from our surrounding communities, various chambers of commerce, various restaurants, food trucks, individuals just showing up to make sure that people have blankets and food and warmth at night and can get by. So it's a very resilient community. We deal with power outages from time to time, be it due to hurricane, be it due to ice storms. But this was one of those circumstances where we didn't have a day or 48 hours or a week of weather reports to prepare. It just sort of happened in the blink of an eye. But all of our emergency plans were put into place, and beyond our police and fire and EMS, who always do a bang-up job, a lot of public works employees are out there keeping safe water running, keeping the sewers working, and just as a community, it's been a really promising situation, and people have really stepped up.
So what steps do you think need to be taken to prevent this from happening again in the future?
Well, obviously, that's a challenge that Duke Energy and many electric providers across the United States will be dealing with. I've heard a number of 55,000 of these types of stations across the United States, so they're clearly a very important and intricate part of our power grid. But that is a number that is difficult to imagine just putting security, for instance, right at a front gate. It's not like a power plant or something. There are a lot of these. They are interconnected, and I know a lot of discussion taking place about exactly how they're going to better harden and make these things safe. Typically, if it were just one station, we may not even know the difference, because they have been very successful in building redundancy into these types of systems. But when you take two out located this closely together, we're seeing the impacts.
All right, Reagan Parsons, we appreciate your time today. Good luck to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, Harry and Meghan are being honored with a prestigious award as their upcoming docuseries is already causing controversy. More on that when we come back. Welcome back. Part one of Harry and Meghan's new documentary drops tomorrow, but it's already making waves on both sides of the Atlantic. It comes as the couple was honored here in New York for their human rights work. ABC's Trevor Ault has the latest.
Harry and Meghan in New York City receiving an award for their humanitarian work. The pair honored by the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Foundation for speaking up on racial justice and mental illness, described as incredibly brave by Kerry Kennedy, who gave them the award. Meghan beaming for the cameras as she arrived at the Ripple of Hope Gala.
Nice to share date night with all of you. Thank you for coming.
But while the couple laughed on stage,
thank you for bringing me on this very special date night.
There were some serious undertones. Meghan opening up once again about her previous suicidal thoughts, saying she chose to speak publicly about it to help others. Quote, "We all need to, when we can, if we feel brave enough, to just speak honestly about your own experience," the Duchess said, adding, "It gives other people space and the courage to do the same, but more than that, to really feel like you're not alone." The level of interest in the pair is sky high because of their upcoming docuseries, Harry and Meghan, which will be released tomorrow.
No one knows the full truth. We know the full truth.
This is a really difficult time for the royal family. It's the start of King Charles III's reign. He doesn't have the popularity that his mother had. He wants to keep the monarchy relevant and popular, but you have at the same time all of this content, all of these criticisms from Harry and Meghan, this kind of onslaught of content criticising the royal family and potentially also him personally.
So far, Buckingham Palace has stayed silent when it comes to the documentary, and in public, it appears to be business as usual. Tuesday, at the Diplomatic Corps reception for a night of glamour and honor, the remaining working members of the royal family together.
Last night really emphasised the difference between Harry and Meghan and the working royals. Yes, Harry and Meghan are still hugely high profile, but that's very different to being in a state building, hosting global dignitaries on behalf of a country.
This is a 6-part series. Tomorrow, Netflix will release the first 3 episodes, and the final 3 episodes air next Thursday. We also want to mention, if you or someone you know is struggling with thoughts of suicide, free confidential help is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can call or text the National Lifeline at 988. Diane?
Help is so important. Trevor Alt, thank you. Coming up, it started as a book signing almost no one showed up to. How a viral tweet now has that author hearing from some of the biggest names in publishing. After this. Welcome back. There's nothing like throwing a party and no one showing up. And that's basically what happened to one new author. But a viral tweet now has her hearing from some of the biggest names in publishing. Will Gans has her story.
Of Crowns and Legends is an epic fantasy novel about the children of King Arthur from the magical mind of debut novelist Chelsea Banning.
I started working on this, I think, my sophomore or junior year of high school. And I'm 33 now. So it's been a while.
So Chelsea was expecting an equally epic turnout for her first ever book signing at a bookstore outside of Cleveland, Ohio. Instead, only 2 people showed up. So on Sunday morning, Chelsea posted this. Only 2 people came to my author signing yesterday, so I was pretty bummed about it, especially as 37 people responded going to the event. Kind of upset, honestly, and a little embarrassed. That tweet taking off. Even Stephen King replying. At my first Salem's Lot signing, I had 1 customer. A fat kid who said, "Hey, bud, do you know where there's some Nazi books?" And Margaret Atwood, author of The Handmaid's Tale, saying to Chelsea, "Join the club. I did a signing to which nobody came, except a guy who wanted to buy some Scotch tape and thought I was the help."
Seeing these titans of the industry weigh in and give you some support, what does that make you feel like?
Amazing.
This wielder of words left speechless.
My favorite one so far who replied today was Flavor Flav. I know. I know.
Yo, here to hype up your next signing. Meanwhile, Of Crowns and Legends is the #1 bestseller in its genre on Amazon.
If your book touches one person, then that's enough.
Chelsea tells us that Of Crowns and Legends is only part 1 of a trilogy, and that the library she works at is planning a book signing of its own. TBD, though, on whether Flavor Flav is going to be there to hype up the crowd. What do you think, Diane?
With the clock around his neck and everything. Will Gans, thank you. And thank you for joining us. I am Diane Macedo. Do stay with us as ABC News Live continues with more news, context, and analysis.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.